All right, man. So it looks like we got some absolutely massive news here coming out of the state of Texas. It looks like Kamala Harris is having a massive, massive surge in the state of Texas. Texas definitely seemed to be lost. It was lost by about 5.5 points with Biden when it was expected to come really close. But it looks like Kamala Harris is starting to really eat into the deficit that Biden had. So we can see a new poll has dropped. It's from YouGov, they're a B-rated pollster. The poll is dated 8/16, 1365 likely voters. It says new general election poll Texas, Trump 50% plus 5, Harris 45%. The last poll versus Biden was Trump plus 9. So she's effectively halved his deficit, and we're only in August. We're not even in September yet. So the ground that she's covered is insane. This is a legitimately massive surge. And what's super interesting about this massive surge is, but we go ahead and take a look at the 2024 numbers. We can first see here, we can see that these margins in this race, we can see there's definitely a clear shift you can kind of generally see from here. So you can see like kind of from here on, like 8, 9, 10, and those kinds of areas. And then now it's down to 7 and 5. We only have 2 polls from Texas, so hopefully we get more of those polls coming out. But they have 2% for Kennedy, 1% for Stein, 1% for Oliver. Now, what I personally like to do for these kinds of polls is I want to see how close were you in 2020, because I want to use that to model how correct I think you're actually going to end up being. So why don't we do that? This is a YouGov poll, right? Let's check to see how YouGov did in 2020. So for YouGov, when we look at YouGov in 2020, what we can see is there's actually a YouGov poll right here, and it had Trump plus 5. So they had Trump winning by 5. Now, scrolling back up to the top here, we can see that Trump had a 1.1 margin. He was polling at 48.6%, and Biden was polling at 47.5%. So if we go ahead and take a look at the results in 2020, here's what ended up happening. Trump actually ends up winning by significantly more. This is about, I think, 5.6 points, so slightly over 5.5. And Trump actually way outperforms his numbers again, which is crazy. So he overperforms even when he's already at 50% or close to 50. He's at 48.6, and he literally stims almost 4 points, which is absolute insanity. An overperformance of near 4 points is really crazy. And Biden actually also underperformed. So in the Rust Belt, it looked like Biden had evidence of overperformance in Arizona and Georgia. Here he has underperformance in at least 2 of the Rust Belt states. I think he had, or Wisconsin, he had heavy underperformance as well. But this is another example of him actually underperforming the polls. But what we can see is the actual outcome was about a margin of about 5.5 points. And we can see that YouGov in 2020 was almost exactly on the money. Trump plus 5 here, and in fact, YouGov had even another poll here, Trump plus 5. And there are a lot of Biden plus 3, plus 2, plus 1s. And YouGov was kind of the one standing out. There's this Crosswinds Media and Public Relations poll that was really close. And so YouGov is actually, I think, pretty accurate from what we can see from the past, because they literally were damn near exactly on the money. The margin was 5.6. They said 5 multiple times. Okay? They were really, really close. The aggregate was horrible. It was completely off. Now, what's really interesting to say, well, what the hell happened? Why did Trump surge so hard? Because there's one thing for Biden to do so poorly, right? He did so horribly in terms of like weight underperformance, right? He was at 47.4, and he somehow only ends up at 46.5. So he's down almost a whole point. But Trump overperforms by like 4 points. So what exactly went down? So there's this really great website. I'd recommend checking out as-coa.org. It's really cool. They have like really, really deep information about what ended up happening with the Hispanic vote, just generally and now. So it says, chart how U.S. Latinos voted in the 2020 presidential election. So something absolutely insane happened in 2020, and I'm not sure you know how significant it was. So for reference, Biden gets 59% of the Hispanic vote nationally. That's his national average. And then we can see here the state level breakdowns. So he actually matches his numbers in Texas for 59%. And then these other states like Florida, he underperforms. Georgia also slightly underperforms. North Carolina is the same. Virginia overperforms. Arizona, he overperforms by a good amount, which likely helped to win. But Arizona looks to be like one of the more progressive groups of the swing states. In Texas, though, you can see he actually retains his 59%. And so it's saying here 23% of all voters, 59. And so what you can see here is it went down by 2 points. So Clinton goes down, or it goes down 2 from Clinton. Clinton was actually 66 nationally. She ends up getting 61, which is 5 less. So something seems to be going on with Texas Hispanics versus the average. But what we're going to see here is truly shocking. So here's what's crazy. So in Texas, Donald Trump surged 6 points among Hispanics, which is absolutely massive. That's 3 times the deficit that Biden had compared to Clinton. So he goes down by 2 points against Clinton, and then he ends up, and then Trump opposite goes up by 6, getting 40% of the Hispanic vote, which is absolutely insane. And I'll talk about this maybe in depth in another video, but he overperformed by 12 in Florida, and he overperformed by 14 in Georgia. So shame on those Hispanic voters. But there seems to be this massive shift in favor of Trump. So the big question is, if Kamala Harris wants to win this election, she's going to have to find a way to blunt this force. Another thing is, are the polls already taking this into account? Because, now in 2024, he's already polling at 50%. A lot of the polls already have him at 50, 53, 54, 52. So if he's already at those kinds of numbers, obviously you'd have to get to like a 50% at least to be able to win, or to be able to come close, right? But we would not take into account that underestimation of Trump was absolutely massive. Has his increase with the Hispanic voters already been spent? Is it already gone? That's kind of the big question. Another obviously important question is, how is Kamala doing with actual Hispanic voters? So this article says Kamala Harris more than triples gap with Hispanic voters in 1 month poll. It says VP Kamala Harris's lead among Hispanic voters has more than tripled since she entered the 2024 presidential race, according to the polling conducted by The Economist YouGov. So they had her at 54 to 34, which is still too low. I think if you want to win the election, it's highly unlikely you could possibly win with just 54 to 34. I think you need a larger margin, but 34 nationally would have it lower. I don't know what number nationally Trump actually got. I'm not actually sure. But Biden got 59, so it must have been somewhere close to around there. But I think you need more than 54. I think the magic number is at least you need like 59 bare minimum what he got. But she still has a lot of time. We're just in August. There's a lot of time to surge. And then also in Arizona, she's leading amongst Hispanic voters. Arizona, I think, has like one of the most progressive Hispanic voting blocks. Also, keep in mind, Hispanic voters are leaning young. So if you want to appeal to them, you go on economic issues. That's likely why they went so heavily for Bernie in the primary election. But what's interesting is you can see here, Hillary got destroyed in the state of Texas. It was basically by it was 9 points here, but GJ was in here at 3. Gary Johnson was in here by 3.2 percent. Assuming there's kind of a large margin there, like a 1.5 at least, bare minimum. This is more like a 10 de facto, right? So let's say it's like 10. He halves the margin. So the margin is halved. Another important thing to notice about Texas is you see as the margin gets halved, net margin-wise, there's a lot more voters here, right? So here there's about over 11 million voters. Here there's 7, 8.4, not even 9, right? So not even 9 million voters. There's an increase of 2 million voters in the race. So what we also analyzed for the Sunbelt states is they're very heavily turnout based. We saw that Georgia was able to move because there was an introduction of almost 1 million new voters, and he still barely won. So is Texas another turnout state? It likely is. And so if they want to be competitive in Texas, they would have to also focus on this kind of turnout issue, because we can see that they were able to make that mark when 2 million more people came in. So what I think is likely going to happen, you can see these kind of moving here. In this Austin area, a bunch of these actually turned blue from 2016. So in 2016, this Austin area here, it was only Travis that was blue. So he flipped Williamson and Hayes County. He flipped them both blue. So this is Williamson and Hayes. I don't know why they have them different here. They have Hayes and they have the Williamson and it's Williamson and both. But he flipped them. And so I think there was one over here too. I guess Tarrant County also ended up flipping in favor. This is in the Dallas area. So it looks like these I think Californians are probably exodusing over to these areas, especially the Austin area. So presumably that's where these people are going. And presumably there's going to be even more of these people. But what I'm thinking is if Kamala Harris continues her Texas gains with Hispanic voters, I think it could be really, really helpful. The math on it, I'm not 100% sure in terms of how does your margin go down by 5% if your Hispanic vote share goes down by 2 points. The only possible thing I could think of is if as a proportion of the total voting block it went up, like the Hispanic vote. And so the margin of a 59 to whatever Trump has, 39 or whatever, was more sort of presence, that's how you're still able to do it, even though your total margin of Hispanic voters went down. That's the only thing I think of. Otherwise, I don't understand the math on that. But I think a lot of it is also not just Hispanic vote. It's just the Californians moving over to this Austin area is what I think. So do I think that Kamala Harris has a chance in Texas? It's very, very small for her to win Texas. I'll have to see if she's still able to keep making inroads with Hispanic voters and those kinds of things. But what I think is potentially going to happen, we're going to talk about the all-red Ted Cruz race in another video. And then also the other issue is that this is kind of a long-term thing. So I think Kamala I think she can definitely get within like 2 to 3%. Hopefully there's not going to be like a lot of like maybe misogyny on those grounds or anything like that, because Hillary did really poorly compared to her national average with Hispanic voters. So with Hispanic voters nationally, she actually ended up getting, she got 66, which is pretty solid, but she only got 61 in Texas. So maybe it's either conservative, or I don't know if there's more like misogyny or anything like that. Hopefully that doesn't impact the Hispanic vote much or at all. But I think that it's definitely possible to get within 2 or 3 points, which would be huge, because Hillary lost by 10. For this to be within 5 is actually a lot. And then for it to be within just 2 or 3 would be absolutely massive. So she's surging currently in the state of Texas. I think what's really important is really blunting Trump, not just boosting your numbers, but how do you take away from Trump? I think this is probably the state where you really need to eat from Trump. You need to figure out a way to take the food off of his plate, because he's just performing too strongly. And so how do you target those Hispanic voters who are voting for Trump? That's what you have to figure out. And you have to really eat his plate. Like, you have to eat the food off his plate to win. You can't just stem your numbers. You need to take away from him as well, at least a couple percentage points. And so that's kind of what was going on behind that. But Kamala Harris is surging right now in the state of Texas. She's half the lead. And so it likely will get within 2 or 3 points, and hopefully that's at least where it'll end up being. I think they should dump some resources in the state for sure. Money is not a constraint, it looks like, anymore in terms of finding the first order condition. Our constraint optimization problem, our constraint is not really money, right? It's other things, probably like focus, issues, people, etc., like your campaign people. Maybe like brain power in terms of like expertise and things like that. So I think they should, but this is crazy news. And then Florida is even closer. Florida was even closer in 2020 as well. But so both Florida and Texas are kind of like trolling us a little bit. Hopefully it doesn't end up being like that bottomless pit. But yeah, so Texas surging. Definitely let me know. Do you think Texas is in play? Yes or no? And there's a lot of bullishness going on right now. I don't think it's going to flip, but I think it might be able to get close.